Hello, and welcome to session two of the Fear Not Conference. I'm so glad that you've joined us. Compassion Health, in partnership with the New Westminster Seventh Day Adventist Church, is presenting this conference to you because we recognize that there's a need. We recognize that there is a need for people to just get some support, some education, some help, and to just have a chance to process some of the things that have been going on lately and to deal with some of the stress and anxiety that it's brought. It's been a rough year. And as time wears on, you would think that it would get easier, but what's been happening for a lot of people is that the pressure has been mounting. And with the uncertainty of the shifting government regulations, there's been for some of us, a growing sense of anxiety. And so we wanted to help the community to address that. And so by God's grace, we were able to organize to have some wonderful volunteer counselors come and just share with us a message of hope, helping us to understand that this is a normal thing that people are going through, helping us to understand what is going on inside of us when we feel stress and anxiety, and helping us to understand how we can manage that, how we can deal with it in a healthy way. And so we had our first session last night. It was a wonderful session where a professional clinical counselor, Golda Marty, helped us to understand what's happening and how it's affecting many, many people. And we're not alone. We're not alone at all in this. And today, clinical counselor Angela Poach is going to be joining us. And thank you so much for joining us, Angela. Angela is going to be talking to us about empowering us for using the tools that are available to us through CBT. And I'm so excited for this. I just can't wait to kind of get geared up to use those tools. She's going to be preparing us for that. And I'm really happy. Just to give you a kind of a run through, the session after this will be an introduction to CBT tools at 7 p.m. And tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., we're going to have part two of that. We're going to get into some more CBT tools and we're going to have a Q&A. So without further ado, Angela, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Hebron. Thank you for inviting me and having me. I'm glad to be here.
Amen. Amen. Well, you know what, Angela, I'm just so glad to have you. And I'm not going to take up any more of your time. So go ahead, Angela, take it away.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Glad to see lots of numbers. I don't see a lot of faces, but I'm seeing lots of numbers and participants, so that's great. And welcome to have any questions. Go ahead and throw them in the chat, and we'll see what we can do about addressing those either today or at the Q&A tomorrow. So just a little bit about myself. I'm Angela Poach, and I'm a professional registered counselor. I live on the East Kootenays, so I'm on the east side of British Columbia, but I grew up, born and bred in Aldergrove and Netsque. We have family all throughout the coast, and I have colleagues in the UK and Australia and India, and so really one of the benefits to using some of those social building tools that Golda talked about last night, we can use some of the media here at Play to have friends across the world. Anyways, I work at Feeling Good Institute, and we do a lot of advanced CBT. So we don't just stick to cognitive stuff, but we talk about empathy and a lot of stuff, and some stuff I'm going to share with you today. So a lot of this work is based on Dr. David Burns. He's a best-selling author, and lots of free material that he offers. So if you want some more material, there's lots available in that way. So last night, like Hebron mentioned, we learned that we're not alone, and that what you're going through makes a lot of sense, the stress and anxiety. And even right now, I have a little bit of anxiety myself because I want to present what would be helpful to you, and it makes me a little nervous that I can't see faces. I love seeing faces, and but that you're going to learn that that's actually going to help me be a better presenter. So we'll talk more about that in a bit later. But one of the things I wanted to bring out is, even though we're all in this together, we're all experiencing this pandemic, we're all in the same world, so to speak. We experience it differently because we're all individuals. And what causes one person's stress and anxiety may not be as problematic for others. And I think that individuality is really important to remember, so that we're not feeling bad if we feel stressed and someone else isn't, or vice versa. It's such an individual experience, and compassion is a really important part of sharing our experiences with each other. And that also brings up the point that, as a mental health professional, I have learned that it's very important for me not to get stuck with one tool, because different tools help different people. And so I'm so excited that we have so many speakers and different ways to address the stress and anxiety, because what works for one person may not be as effective for another, but there is something out there for you. And so I want to hold out that hope that there are great tools available. So that this social nature that we have, and we actually, the compassion that we need for each other, and the social support that Golda talked about, those are really important for our mental health. And then I would say the next kind of step, although these are very fluid and it doesn't have to go in any particular order, but I would say pretty likely the next step is to kind of be aware of what's going on for ourselves. And it might be why you're here today. And might be that you're here to support a friend, or you're curious. And this awareness of our emotional state, and then what thoughts we're having, that's quite critical to CBT and to any kind of mental health tool. Because when we're not paying attention, we don't know what's going on for ourselves. It can be hard to articulate and then deal with it. And there are times where I've been like feeling the emotion, and then it's like, I don't really know what the thoughts are. And but we do know that they're there, and they might be hidden, they might be subconscious, but we do know that those thoughts are kind of there, and kind of baiting the emotion and making it come to fruition. So and then last night Golda also talked about how not all stress is bad. That's sometimes there's acute stress, which can actually be helpful in some ways, and this is true with emotions as well. There are healthy emotions and there's unhealthy emotions, and we often say, and I say this all the time, so I'm just as much as other people, but we often say negative and positive emotions, but really I think it comes down to healthy and unhealthy emotions. And one might ask, well, what makes an emotion healthy or unhealthy? Like, how would you define that? Well, one of the key things about healthy emotions is it's appropriate to the moment. We would expect to grieve the loss of somebody. That'd be pretty appropriate for that moment. And then there's the intensity of an emotion. And when an emotion starts to get so intense, or it's lasting so long, that's the third one, is how long you're lasting. Like, it's not just an emotion for that moment, but it's like a state of being or a state of mind that's just like, it's like this constant state, that chronicness of it. These are when it tends to shift toward the unhealthy side of that scale. Okay, so how do you fix that? Like, what's the solution? Well, I gotta warn you, change isn't easy. And when it comes to dealing with the uncertainty and the anxiety about the fears we're facing right now, many of us are just trying to survive and get by. And it can take some effort for us to be willing to step back and do a little reflection. And I'm kind of hoping that as you follow along and listen along, you'll do some of your own reflection. I'll just use an example in a workshop like this. It's very difficult to, hit everybody's emotions and thoughts, which would be fun to do in a smaller group. But we'll have one example. We'll just keep that example kind of through this seminar. But I love interaction. So what does that empowerment for better coping mean? That was the title here. tools are great, like, but I don't know, but my husband is an automotive mechanic. And anyone could go to Canadian Tire and buy a toolbox and buy a bunch of tools, right? Like, I mean, hey, just, and then that means you can fix your car because you've got all the tools, right? Like, just go buy the wrench and then you can do the oil change. And yeah, there's a piece in between, right? There's the knowledge, that piece. And so what I want to talk about today is that knowledge of not just how to use the tools, but kind of the prep that might go into it. Like, what are some of the roadblocks I might face if I were to try to fix my car and I don't know what I'm doing, and then I end up in more trouble. I don't want to sound like there's going to be more trouble if you try to have good mental health, but not all analogies work 100%. But let me give you maybe like a kind of another example too. Like, I know we've all seen those slogans and bumper stickers, right? Like, you have a sticker on a bumper sticker, or excuse me, a slogan on a bumper sticker, or we see them on Facebook, and they're like, yeah. And I don't know if you're like me, but like a lot of them, I'm like, well, that's not 100% true, or yeah, that one's really good. I like that one. And you kind of wonder, do people just guess at what might be helpful? Like, does someone just say, oh, I wonder if this line will be great for a bumper sticker? How do you think they pick the bumper stickers? I know these questions are going to be rhetorical, but how do you think they pick those bumper stickers? Who posts these little things? Well, they post them because they feel real to them, right? So we tend to gravitate to what makes sense to us, especially in that moment, and how it relates to our own experiences. And we kind of like information that reinforces what we already believe. Unfortunately, sometimes what we believe is skewed or in conflict with other values that we have. Like, I really struggle with fear of failure, and yet I was a straight A student in high school. So there was conflict, right? Like, I was on the honor roll, but I was so afraid of failing. There's that conflict in the values and my beliefs, because I believed it and the evidence wasn't enough in that moment. So my example for tonight is going to be Julie. Julie wants to become an engineer, and she's heard it's a very competitive field, and she's in her second year at college, and the variant COVID strain has hit her apartment complex. She's in the middle of finals and terrified she's going to get COVID, because then it'd be too hard to study and finish her assignments. How do you think Julie's feeling? You're welcome to throw this in the chat, by the way. What do you think Julie might be feeling if she's in the middle of finals and she's thinking, oh, if I get this COVID strain, I might not do well, and it's a very competitive field. Yeah, she's going to be worried and nervous and anxious, or maybe sad and frustrated, and she might even feel defective, right? Could be any of those. Now, what if someone said to her one of those little bumper slogans? Don't worry, Julie, you're a smart girl. You've come this far. How helpful do you think that will be for Julie? Yeah, not helpful. Why? Wasn't it true? Isn't Julie smart? I mean, she's gotten this far. We know she's probably smart, right? Why doesn't it help if it's true? Well, there's two reasons. Yeah, she can't connect. That's one of them, right? She doesn't believe it. Number one, absolutely true here, Bron. She has to believe it, right? She has to believe that thought is true. And let's face it, I mean, do we always believe what our friends tell us? that outfit looks great on you. And we might believe it, we might not. Yeah. And the second reason it may or may not help her is that conflicting belief, right? That might be holding her back from crushing those worried thoughts. And as someone mentioned, it doesn't change her situation. I want to talk about that too. That was a good point. So on one hand, she can see it's true. She has seen that she can get this far, but on the other hand, she is worried, right? If she gets sick, she won't do well. And engineering is very competitive, so she'll have trouble getting into grad school. And so all this stuff is piling up in her mind. And here's the thing, the negative thought that's probably the most stressful to Julie is not that she might get COVID. It's that if she doesn't complete grad school, if she doesn't be an engineer, she will be a failure. It's kind of tied into her identity, into her being, and so that thought has a lot of power. And so she's got to keep herself vigilant, right? She doesn't want to give up her anxiety. She doesn't want to get sick, and anything that can help her to not get sick is going to be like really in her priority. And so I mentioned it won't change her circumstances. So sometimes we don't want to change how we feel because that is motivating us to have a certain behavior that we would like. And it's hard for us to separate those. And that's what I want to teach you today. I want to teach you, like, how do we get those values and those important things to us on the table so we can step back and go, okay, well, what do I really want from this? And that question of what do I really want, when I work with clients, we call it the magic cure. And I know lots of other therapists use that language. And we kind of say, what if you could have, something out of today's session, what would it be? Like, what would you like to walk away with? Oh, I can imagine Julie saying, I'd like to walk away feeling more relaxed, less stress. Like, I just don't want to be constantly worried that I'm going to catch COVID. I don't want to constantly worry that I'm going to not make my engineering, make my GPA good enough to get into the competitive program, right? And goals are different, right? So a goal of feeling less stress is different from a goal of I want to get my degree. These are two different goals. And we kind of have to figure out, can I have both? Like, do these goals conflict? Do I need to prioritize them? Can I have both? If so, which one do I want first? And it's this processing of information that sometimes we don't think about. We're just trying to get through the day, right? I'm just trying to study. I'm trying to find something to eat. I need to, do my laundry. And so we're just going through all these motions. We're not actually going through like, gee, what is going on for me right now in this moment? So let's say Julie says, you know what, I've decided I want more peace and less anxiety. That's really important to me right now. And I can still work toward my other goals. But right now, this anxiety is just tearing me up inside. It's overpowering me. So I might say something to Julie like, well, and I can say to anyone here, what if I had a magic button that you could push and all the anxiety would just dissolve? And this warm peace would just come over you. Oh, what a wonderful button that would be, right? Just a great button. I mean, who wouldn't want to push that button? Who wants to be miserable and stressed? Of course, there is no magic button. And even if there was, I'd actually want to talk you out of pushing it. Now, it's not that I'm a sadist. No, but it's because I know how important emotions are. And each emotion is tied to something very positive and important to you. And your anxiety and your worry and your fears say a lot of great things about you as a person. In fact, there's benefits to worry. And so for anyone that has to leave, there's going to be a recording. So you can always listen to yesterday's and today's and tonight's too. So before we get onto the work of crushing our negative thoughts that's causing our painful emotions, we want to look at any roadblocks that might be there, these values behind why we're feeling these emotions. And it's a really critical step because life, it's not black and white, just good or bad. There's a dichotomy going on within us. And if we don't unpack our values and our beliefs, they can inadvertently hold us back. So the next exercise I'd like to do with you, I love doing this like with people and they can write it out. So you're always welcome to write it out. And thank you for the loves and the comments. I'm really enjoying that. That helps me stay engaged. So imagine with me, let's see, we're going to look at some advantages of stress and anxiety. And I know this all sounds really weird. Okay. Like I get it. It's like, what? What are you talking about? I came to this workshop to get rid of this. What are you talking about? Like, I want to find relief. And you're right. There are some very painful disadvantages to these feelings. Absolutely. And I wouldn't want to minimize those in any way. I experienced a recent loss just a week ago, and it is very painful. And when I started, I'm feeling a lot more calm now, but when I started, I was quite anxious. It's not comfortable. It's not fun. And I don't want to minimize those. It's really true. On the other hand, it's important for us to see the whole picture, to step and to really look at what's going on for ourselves and inside. So let me switch it, because sometimes this helps understand it better. What would you say if Julie was like, oh, I don't care if I get COVID, I don't care if I pass? What would you think of a person like that? Like, oh, well, it doesn't matter, right? Like when you see it from that angle, does that kind of clear it up a little bit? Like, wouldn't we expect her to have some concern, that she wants to be a good student? So here's some advantages, and I would love for you to throw this in the chat if you can think of any. So I might try and even give a little silence. I know it's a work, not kind of that workshop. I just want to get your brain thinking. I want to just rattle off my ideas. But one thing anxiety does, it kind of protects from danger, right? The amygdala firing. Warning, 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 warning. Something is scary, right? And so, yeah, like preparation, right? Keeps her making sure she's wearing her mask and she's washing her hands and she's doing all the protocols, because she's in this apartment building, right? That has an outbreak. And that's a big benefit, that's protecting her from danger. And it can motivate us to get help. Sometimes anxiety is so much, it's like, I need to reach out. I was struggling with a little bit of anxiety here, and I went and called a colleague and said, you know what, I need to work through this so that I can help my clients, because I practice what I preach, and I'm feeling a little anxiety in this area. And so the colleagues help me work through that. So it can motivate us to get help and do something about our situation. I think I've seen some come up. What other things encourage you to do the right thing? Oh, I love that. Yeah, absolutely. And eustress. It can prevent us from being complacent, right? Like just sort of, well, whatever, I'll wash my hands once a week. It's fine. Whatever, like, I'll change my mask once a month. Mercy, yeah, it can give us compassion for others, right? Have greater understanding. It can actually provide energy. Anxiety is kind of an energy drink. Like sadness and depression kind of gives us a bit of a break, a reprieve from like high standards, and anxiety kind of combats that a little bit, gives us some energy, helps me like stay on my toes, and not fall asleep while I'm trying to talk. Anxiety and stress can help me to see and identify potential risks, right? Like look at the things and go, okay. I remember in college, I did a business plan and a marketing plan. Was in marketing class. We did like a business plan. And the teacher said, he goes, I almost never give an A on a business plan. He said, but your what ifs of what could go wrong for this business was enormous. I'm like, I'm really good at looking at all the things that could go wrong. It's like, oh yeah, this could happen and this could happen and this could happen. And when you can identify those risks before they happen, you can prepare and plan ahead, right? Kind of sets you up for success. And then I think I mentioned this already, but like it's a red flag that kind of helps me take stock. Now I know, like when I have some anxiety, it's like, okay, is it, what's it doing to help me? And do I need as much as I have, or can I dial this back? And Hebron mentioned that last night. We talked about that dial. Now that's kind of some advantages and benefits, but let's talk about the values too. Like, what does Julie's anxiety say about her as a person? That's positive and awesome. What does it say? Does it show that she cares about being a good student, that she, values the education she has, and maybe she has high standards? Are those good things? I mean, are they important in life? Yeah, I mean, it shows we care about something. I usually have like little blanks, right? Because it depends what you're anxious about. If you're anxious that someone you love is going to catch COVID, for example, it shows how much you love them and you care about them and they mean so much to you and you want them around as long as possible, right? And it just shows care and value and love, and that you would be sad if something happened. It also can show a mirror to her heart. Yeah, I love that. That's beautifully written, Miriam. It shows that she's unwilling, or anyone can fit in this, but we're using Julie as an example. She's unwilling to just let things happen, right? But she wants to get involved. She wants to help. What can I do? She's taking responsibility as much as possible. Like, what can I do to set myself up for success? And some others are, it shows that if we're anxious about what other people might think, then it shows we care about other people's ideas and that we listen to people and that they matter to us. Shows that we're not ignorant of reality, what risk is, or just like jumping into things. These will, of course, change depending on what you're anxious about and who the person is. But I think you're getting the idea of how this works. And you can do this with any emotion. And some of them seem really tough, but they really are there. So the question is, oh, wow, with all those benefits and advantages, we can just go home, right? Yep, we're all fine now. Unfortunately, right? Yeah, not quite. Just because we know something, it's got to sink in. We got to process it. We still need some of those tools that are coming in this workshop. And I might even get it to a few today. We'll see how far I get. So when we ask the question, well, then why do we want to change? Because this is helpful. When we're going to make a change in our life, it's helpful for us to know, okay, this is why I am the way I am, and look at it positively. Because if we just look at it negatively, then we're just like beating ourselves up. We're not really digging deep. But if we can look at, hey, wait a minute, here's some really good reasons why I'm this way, but I don't want to stay here. It is too painful. It's too much. It's too intense. It's too stressful. And so we're like, well, no, I want to keep all the advantages and benefits you just described, but I don't want to be this anxious. And that's where that magic dial is. What if we could dial it back? And that actually, we do kind of have a dial. So we don't have a button. We do have a dial. Because as we use tools like some of the relaxation tools that we talked about this weekend and some of the cognitive behavior tools, those, as you use them and you find the ones that work for you, they start to dial back these emotions so they're more manageable and coping. And really what we want is kind of a mix, right? Because life is a mix, not black and white. You could be going to a wedding and find out that someone passed away on the same day. And you're going to feel sad and happy at the same time. I think a lot of people think that's really weird, like I'm not allowed to, or how do I deal with this? And they get all mixed up. And you know what? That's kind of how we're actually capable of doing that. It's actually pretty healthy to sometimes feel a little blue, and yet, I'm grateful about this, and I'm happy about this, and I have faith God will get me through. But on the same time, I'm a little concerned, right? Kind of find this. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Sherry. You have a death and a wedding at the same, in the same year. Yeah, we this is life. The more people we know, the more we'll have these kind of interwoven experiences. Part of life. I'm noticing my camera's wiggling every time I speak on my table. I'm half Italian, and my dad says if he wants to shut me up, he's just gonna tie up my hands. So I can't talk. Anyways, I'm like, so sorry for the wiggling. But I do think I'm too close to my thing. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about. We do have some time to talk a little bit about some of the tools. So what's kind of the setup of the process of what goes on for us in our hearts and minds and thoughts. And so one of the first tools that I want to talk about is, well, the first couple tools I talk about are not specific to necessarily cognitive behavior therapy. I use a lot of different tools. I don't just use cognitive tools because I want to make sure, hey, whatever works, like if it's working for people, that's what I want to use. But the first one I want to talk about is prayer. And I understand not everybody listening will be Christian or even have a particular faith, and there's definitely more tools. So, but I'd be remiss as a person myself of faith not to speak about this powerful tool of healing. The 12-step program, which was initially created for alcoholism, embodies this concept. And a lot of times in the big book, they talk about this regeneration of who you are and dealing with stress. So it's a very important tool. The second general tool, so to speak, is an attitude of gratitude, and not necessarily just a put on a happy face Pollyanna thing, like not that sort of like arbitrary, well, I should just be happy, I should be happy, but really just that moment of experience, like, oh, you know what, I love having a hot shower. And I have a good friend in India, and I have friends in Thailand. And my friends in Thailand, that's not always an option. Um, and while that may seem really superficial, but in that moment I can just hold on to that and just feel like, oh, just embrace that gratitude. It's almost like a state of being, not just sort of this arbitrary, but I know some people, they love doing gratitude journal. So there's lots of different ways you can express gratitude. Song, for me, I love singing. That's an expression of gratitude. So there's lots of different ways you can do gratitude, whatever works for you. And then, the first CBT tool that I would like to talk about is identifying and explaining distortions. So how I typically work is getting very specific. Depression, anxiety loves to live in the general. It's like floating around and really hard to like get it and deal with it. And so when we get really specific, we're actually able to conquer it much easier than if we stay in the general. So let's say in Julie's case, one of her negative thoughts is like, one of the negative thoughts that's causing her so much anxiety is, I should do well on every exam, right? Or every assignment. And this should statement, we would call that a distortion, because she's making this rule that doesn't exist outside in a moral sense or a legal sense. And instead she's like creating her own rules. Well, what's wrong with that? Why would that be a problem? Why would that even be a thinking error? Well, it's because if we can make our own rules and make our own rules, we can keep beating ourselves up. If there's no standard and it can just go anywhere, wherever we're feeling that day. And that can be really, really painful. And anyone who's a perfectionist will know how harsh shoulds and musts and oughts are. Now, when Julie could use this tool and go, okay, well, I can see that there's that distortion here. It's a should statement. Now what? Well, then we would do the next tool, which is called straightforward thinking. This one doesn't always work, but if you identify the distortions first, then it tends to be helpful. And I could say something like, well, what could you say instead of I should do well on every assignment? We could use what's called the semantic method, where we soften the language, right? We could say, I prefer, I would like to do well. I'd prefer to do well. We could turn it into a goal. Instead of a club beating ourselves over the head, we could turn it into a goal, right? I would love to achieve excellence. Yeah, I'll do my best. Yeah. So whatever language works for you, and it'll be different for different people. Just like the bumper sticker, we can't make one bumper sticker that makes everybody feel better. One sentence won't make anyone feel better. So like, that's why I can't just do one seminar and list all the good attributes. Here we go. Here's all the good thoughts that you can think, and you'll be okay if you just think all these good thoughts, right? It has to be relatable to you, and you have to believe it about you. So if Julie were to come up and say, yeah, I'd prefer to do well on my exams and my assignments, but I know that my parents love me and they're going to support me if I have to retake one of my tests. So she might come up with that as her positive statement, or a realistic, a rational thought. So that's kind of a couple tools there. Another one might be shades of gray. So if there's all or nothing thinking, that's a distortion. I'd love to I had thought about doing a daily mood log and showing you some of the other tools, but I didn't want to overwhelm, and I wasn't sure how far I'd get. But another distortion, if you want to hear about any more of these, or if you want some handouts, you're welcome to reach out, and they can get your information to me, or vice versa, and I can get you some more information on that. But another distortion is all or nothing thinking, or black and white thinking, where we polarize everything. And so in life, very few things are that black and white, right? Things are on a scale. Sadness, anxiety, all of these things are on a scale, right? They're not like all on or off, like there is some things like pass or fail, right? On a test. But as far as doing well, is that 91% or 94% or 89%? What is that? Understanding those shades of gray. So she might say something like, I'd prefer to get a 90, so that keeps my GPA up. But I can find contentment with passing, or something like that, right? Like that might be more specific to Julie's situation. So that might be her shades of gray comment. And I'm sure there's a lot better ones. And whoever's in the situation, they're the one that's going to come up with the powerful thought. Yeah, there are many more. How do you change? I'm just gonna look at the chat here quickly. You could say I would do my best. Yeah, I meant that one. How do you change from I should get an A on every assignment to I would like to? Yeah. And that's what I'm saying about this being like this process of working through these tools to get there. And at some point there's like, what I always do with it is, well, how much do you believe the negative thought? So in Julie's case, I should do well. It's 100% usually. And then when we ask her, well, what's a positive thought? And she says, I'd prefer to do well. Then I would ask, well, how much do you believe that thought? Is it, how true is that to you, that I should do well? Well, it's 100% true. Well, now how much do you believe the negative thought? Sometimes it only moves a little bit. Sometimes she goes, well, I still believe it 90%. So that means she'll still have an emotional response to that negative thought. But if she says, well, maybe 20, then that emotion also drops, right? And so I just keep working through tools with her until those numbers come down. And like I said, I don't want to trip over Trisha's tools, and she's gonna be talking about more tonight as well. And I went through this really fast, and I probably talked too fast. I have one colleague that will tell me in the chat, slow down, Angela. And I should have mentioned to Hebron to do that. That's okay. So I actually could open up to question and answers. I could do a quick summary. Let me do a quick summary first. So today what we talked about, repeat the definition of distortion. Oh, great question. Yeah, so a distortion is when there's part of a thought that has an untruth to it. So it could be because it's exaggerating, right? Well, distortion, I'll give you an example of a distortion in order to describe it. But like this, I think like, I have to get 95% on this exam or the world's going to end, right? Like it's that dramatic. That's distorted because Julie's a valuable human being, even if she failed, even if she never even got into engineering, she's still a worthwhile human being. But the distortion is that somehow that's connected to her value, that she's not going to be a failure, she's going to be rejected, she's going to be, there's all these things connected. And so the distortion is in that attachment that we put to it. I hope I explain. I don't know if it's a hard one to explain that way without being really specific. Great question though. Yeah, there's actually 10 distortions, depending on who you look at. There's a couple different authors on it. There's 10 or 12 distortions. But they all, like if you look at the list, they're pretty much the same 10 or 12. And they've been around since 74 or 76. I think they came up with the list of distortions that Aaron Beck and David Burns came up with them together. David Burns used to work with Aaron Beck. And so they kind of came up with it, and just with thousands of therapists using these tools, they haven't found any new stuff. Like they really do all fit in these 10, which is quite impressive and amazing. So today we were learning about how, we have these steps, right? The first is saying, okay, wait a minute, there's something going on in my life and I need to take stock, right? Just the awareness, the piece that said, maybe I should check out this seminar this weekend, right? That's the piece, that's that first one. And then we learned that then it's like this, understanding the connection that thoughts have with emotions, that it's what I think about something that makes me feel the way I feel. That's why so many people can go through the same event and people come out feeling differently. And then we learned about this, that our values, and there's some benefits to healthy emotions, and there's even some advantages, albeit combined with disadvantages, to even unhealthy emotions and triggers. And so if we don't identify those for ourselves and look at our values, that can lead to some resistance to letting go of them. And that's really important stuff. And then we learned a little bit about just a couple methods and so on. So that's kind of a little bit of a summary. I'm just going to check here. Untrue thought that affects my emotion. Yeah. So I love that point. The untrue thoughts cause the painful emotions. True thoughts create healthy emotions, right? Like I loved my kitty. I loved his little lap snuggles, and I felt like nature connects me to God and creation, and I love that. And so when he passed away, I thought, I'm going to miss him, and that thought makes me sad. Those are healthy, right? So it's still the thought that makes me sad, not the fact that he died. Because my neighbor knows my cat died, and that doesn't make my neighbor sad, right? So even though that there's a real event happening, it's what I'm thinking and how it impacts me personally, my thoughts about it. That's what causes the emotions. And lots of them are perfectly normal and perfectly healthy. There's nothing wrong with those. In fact, we would think it's weird if we really love somebody and they passed away and we're like, oh, good riddance. Like, that'd be awful. We're like, what? That'd be terrible. Sometimes it's easier to see these things when we look in the reverse. And what if we think we could never love another? There you go, Hebron. Hebron hit a good one. So this would be a distorted thought, right? I can never love a pet like I loved Ranger ever again. So that would be overgeneralization, where I take a specific moment. I'm feeling really miserable right now, and I loved him so much, and he was so special. One specific moment, and I'm generalizing it to my whole life ahead of me, right? There's actually a couple other distortions in that thought, like fortune telling, where I'm like predicting the future. I'm never going to find anyone to love me the same again. So it's fortune telling. There's emotional reasoning. It feels so true. It must be true. I feel like a failure. I must be a failure. That was a big, strong one for me. How do you fight that? It's a feeling. Oh, it feels true. And there's some great rational tools that helped me get over that. Great comments, guys, and great questions. And we're just scratching the surface, and there's so much more. But I think, Hebron, I'll turn over to you, or questions, because I feel like I'm in a spot where I could end up going like, and then I'll end up having to talk for another half hour if I keep going.
I hear you. And you know what? That I think that would be so easy to do because once you start getting into the actual implementation of this, that's, you get into those details, and then it gets really interesting, right? The people want more.
Yeah, good.
We gotta have to pace it out, but yes, definitely. If we have any questions, we can probably do maybe 2 questions. If anyone has any other questions.
And I'll be here Sunday morning too, so
yeah,
we'll get some more. And Trisha's gonna have an amazing talk tonight as well. So Golda did awesome. If you missed Golda's, I encourage you to watch the rerun. It's on Facebook and on the Compassion Health Facebook page. So.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I have a question. Looks like someone says the book.
Yeah, The Lost Art of Thinking by Nick Nelly. I love that one. I have that one. That is taken from a lot of David's material. So David is kind of the originator of what a lot of Nedley talks about. So When Panic Attacks by David Burns is my favorite, and you can get it probably at most libraries. So yeah, Dr. David Burns. When Panic Attack is great. He has free podcasts. It's feelinggood.com if you want to listen to his free podcasts.
So, Angela, could you go a little bit more into the magic dial? I really like that concept.
Oh yeah, sure. So I mean that's really where we're trying to dial back the intensity of our emotions. My goal is not to get to zero, and a lot of people when they first come in, they're like, cure me. I don't want any zero depression. I want zero anxiety. And the idea is really that some of that is healthy. it's just, it's painful when it's at 80, 90, 100 for days on end, or even for a small event. So what can happen is like a small event happens, like, my kids left for school and all of a sudden I felt terror, right? Like this a normal everyday event, and this rating of terror comes. And so what I want to do with a client like that is let's dial that back. Like, it's okay for a mom to be concerned about her kids going to school. That's perfectly healthy. I don't want to take that all the way to zero. So maybe, and so different clients will pick different numbers, but I literally have a goal sheet with them and we circle all their emotions, where they're at right now, and then where do they want to be, and we set goals. And some clients, say 5, and some, I've even had clients go, now that I've done this positive reframe, this is what was called, we did, like, looked at all my values and all the benefits it had, I'm okay with 50. And I've always been shocked because I'm thinking, I like my emotions low, like the 0, like the 5 range. And I've had clients like, I can handle 50. That makes total sense to feel this much anxiety in that moment, right? That whatever that moment was, preparing for an exam, for example. So yeah, so we're just dialing it back. Does that explain your question, or did I recap that for you, Hebron, in a way that you understood it?
Yeah, well, that's definitely a good recap. I guess I'm kind of wondering, and maybe you don't want to get too deep into this because this might go into the next talk. Is that what was going? Because I'm wondering, like, okay, it's good to. I love the idea of, first of all, measuring it. One of the great managing gurus, uh, uh, Peter Drucker, he says, "What doesn't get measured doesn't get managed." And so I love that aspect of, and just in Team CBT, the little that I know about it, that it seems to be very evidence based. They like to put numbers to things, and
Yeah.
let's measure it. It's not going to be just guesses and wonders and wishes. We're going to nail it down and be specific, and we're going to ask the questions that we want answers to. But
Yep, for sure.
maybe you can just name the techniques that you would use to kind of actually do the dialing.
Well, actually, the dialing, Hebron, is really simple. I just ask the client, what would you like the number at? And then, do you mean, how do I get there? Like, how do I reach that goal?
How do you turn the dial once we have it?
Okay, so this is my goals. Yeah. So we turn the dial by naming it, first of all. Like, this is the goal I want: 10% anxiety, 30% sadness. And then, how do I get there? Unfortunately, most of the time I end up crushing them all. So we don't usually go past the goal setting, because usually once we crush those negative thoughts, usually we crush those negative emotions. So I don't always try to get them to exactly their goal. It's kind of one of those things. Yeah, the tools are, like I mentioned, the first one I do is I go through we have that list of 10 distortions, and we'll find all the distortions in that negative. We always pick one negative thought to work on
Oh,
at a time. So I have a worksheet, and that was what I was going to share with you. And I might have one handy. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if I've got one. Anyways, but so we do a worksheet. Actually,
and you do the thought one at a time. You don't just try to take all the thoughts that you get.
no, we pick one event,
Wow.
one upsetting event, and then we list all the negative thoughts for that event, and then we work on one thought at a time. Because, like I said, depression, anxiety, these things, they live in these general, where your brain is just hitting with all, like, you can imagine if someone's criticizing you and they just laid in one criticize after another, one criticism after another. It's pretty hard to defeat them. Like, they just kind of come at you and you start to believe it. And so no, we stop and we go, wait a minute, let's pick one moment in time, who, what, when, where, and then we list all the negative thoughts for that event. And then we pick one negative thought at a time. And often what I find with clients, and even some of my own personal work and friends who've done these things, is that first negative thought is pretty tough to crush. We could go through 5, 6, 7, sometimes 10 techniques to crush that first thought. And then the others get easier, typically speaking.
Okay, I like this because there's a metaphor brewing in my mind, and the metaphor is you're in a dark room with a plastic bag over your head, and there's 10 guys just whacking you over the head with bats. And then you come in, Angela comes in to save the day, and she says, "Whoa, hey, break it up, break it up." You turn on the light, you take off the bag, you take the bat out of this guy's hand, out of their hands, and you say, one at a time.
I love that, Hebron. That's pretty awesome.
And if I
Yeah,
can't beat the dude the first time, I get to try again and again
that's right.
and again until I can get him down. And then the next one. And then
That's right. I'll use karate and judo and whatever it takes, boxing. So some of the techniques, just to list, I mean, there's all kinds, but I mean, there's the shades of gray, semantic technique where you try to find the soft in the language. There's the Socratic method where you ask yourself questions to try and find the unrealistic part of that negative thought. Why is that thought unrealistic? And there's certain questions you ask to get there. One of my favorites is called externalization of voices, where you actually get in a role play and I say all those negative thoughts to you and you have to verbally counteract them in session. And then we can switch roles if you get stuck. And that one is super powerful. I have watched David do this. I've done this with clients and watched a shift happen. I encourage you to look at some of the podcasts. I've watched David do this live to people who've had, one lady had severe anxiety for 4 years, struggling with sleeping for 4 years. And he did this technique, and it was 3 hours of demo, just under 3 hours, but it was at 30 seconds in that moment. And you saw the light switch in her like this. She got it. And she came back the next day in tears and she said, I haven't slept that good since before the event that had happened to her.
Wow.
4 years prior, that triggered all this anxiety for her. And like I met one of his ladies and she had struggled with depression and anxiety for years. She crushed it live and everybody goes, well, does it last? And I met her 10 years later and she said she needed one tweaking follow-up. Wow. But that 3 hours changed her whole life. So I mean, I don't have that kind of skill. I can't promise 3 hours of work. But what I'm saying is like you've got to get to the right tool. Yeah. And you don't want to you don't want to stick to one thing over and over and over and keep trying it and trying it and trying it and get stuck there. So it's important to, if I had.
I've got a question here and I'm wondering, I'm not sure if it's going to be a long one, so I want to try to get it out as fast as I can. The person says, what if you have feelings about something, you had a fear of something and it eventually came true? For example, thinking that you're going to fail, you're afraid that you're going to fail, and eventually it actually does happen.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a real painful event that happens to us, and it kind of adds some evidence, right? We look at, we'll go, here's the evidence. I could fail. I have failed in the past. I've gone blank doing presentations. Was my fear here this morning or this evening was, oh no, I'm gonna go blank. gonna go blank. And it's happened to me. I have gone blank and I have kind of stuttered over it, and I've had someone come up to me afterwards and say, Angela, were you okay? Like, they noticed. It wasn't just in my head, it was real. And those are really, really super painful. And I would say that there's likely some underlying values and beliefs going on there, because the reality is we do fail and we do make mistakes, and that doesn't always bring immense pain. What brings immense pain is this idea that I have to be Superwoman or Superman and never make mistakes. Like Thomas Edison, it was like almost 600 different variations before he got the right one to make the light bulb last longer, because he was trying to get longer lasting life out of a bulb. The idea of the bulb had been invented already, but it wasn't feasible. It was like a parlor trick until Edison, really put it to the test. And he had to do a lot of failing to get, now everyone has a light bulb. I mean, we've got lots of light bulbs just in every room, and we don't even think about it, how much failure went into that. So
failure itself that's painful. It's the belief about what the failure says about me as a person.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Yeah. A good, one example I think about is, imagine yourself being wrongfully accused and thrown into prison, and not just a nice prison here in Canada, but a prison overseas where it's a dirt floor and you're shackled and it's painful and there's rats and it's wet and dark. How would you feel if you were wrongly in prison?
Not good, not safe.
Yeah. So why were Paul and Silas singing? Because in their mind, it was a witnessing opportunity. right? In their mind, instead of thinking how they've been wrongly accused, and they would have every right to do that. Don't get me wrong, they would have every right, right? To say, this is a horrible place. I don't belong here. It's unfair. Would all be true statements. But instead, they were like, what are that jailer's doing? You know, we heard about his family. Let's try and witness to him. And they took their mind off self, which is another tool, right? Another tool is to reach out and do service, and that quite often can help us feel better. It's one of the things that Golda talked about, that social connection, that bonding is so important for our mental health. And sometimes service, reaching out, can be so fulfilling and rewarding, and really take a burden off. And for me, every time I see a client, I just feel so energized. It's really, you know, empowering. That's not to say sometimes I need, like this week after my cat passed away, I needed a break, and lovingly the Lord actually cleared up my schedule. Some of it I did, and some of it was just like things happened. It was wonderful. It was like the internet crashed and the Rogers, so my backup crashed. I didn't have a cell phone, didn't have internet, so I couldn't see clients. Yeah, I love, yeah, Shannon, you're 100% right. Service is a huge tool for mental health, and it doesn't minimize what you're feeling and maximizes what others are going through. Absolutely. 100%. It's actually one of the tools in my favorite book, Ministry of Healing, so is service. So yeah.
Speaking of books, I don't know if you can see.
Oh yeah, that's the original. That's the old one. Yeah. Yeah, I actually know David, and he's a great guy, and very compassionate and generous. And I'm one of the small group leaders in Tuesday night. He leads out a thing for therapists from Stanford University, and because of COVID, they can't meet in person, so they've been doing it online. So I got invited. I'm like, this is exciting. I'm like, it's a little intimidating because we go to breakout sessions, and I'm the small group leader for like these professors and doctors, and I'm like, oh, I'm just a hillbilly from Hicksville. But
you have to bring out those tools and remember.
I have to use those tools too. Absolutely, absolutely. And it gets faster. This is a ray of hope that for those of you who are I'm still 34, so I'm so glad you guys are listening to my banter. What I have experienced is some of these tools came in my life. I did have really, you know, great upbringing. My parents were awesome, and I had pretty nice church mentorship, at least the adults. I had some conflict with kids, but you know, some of these tools came from just reading the Bible, and my favorite author is Ellen White, and some of those tools are from there. And so like when David, he's got different names for them, but they're similar tools, and they work. Like they're there. I mean, you know, God said it, it's gonna work, right? Like this, it's just how it works. So so some tools help me get through some really hard times in my life. I had some near-death experiences. I've been bullied, had some issues for sure. But then, you know, there's still some personal work that has to go on: the fear of failure, fear of rejection, perfectionism. But now when these things hit me, like, oh, I feel like a failure, it takes like maybe 30 seconds for me to crush that. I just use the same tool again. So once you get the tools, once you know what tools work for you, those will work every time. And so they do come back. Life has ebbs and flows. You know, some days we have good days and bad days, but typically speaking, they work pretty fast. And then you have healthy blue days that are just normal, like, you know, when someone passes away, or you see, you know, injustice in the world, and you have that, you know, righteous indignation. These are healthy, and we want to feel it for that moment. And yeah, smooth seas don't make for skilled sailors. Yeah, I think that's one of the things I just really like working with my colleagues in the Feeling Good Institute, and a lot of Christian counselors too will do this. Is, you know, we've got to practice what we preach, and I think that's the only way to really share what's working and what isn't working. That said, what works for me may not work for you, right? That's why I can't just do a 1-hour seminar and say, well, hey, this is what fixed my perfectionism, because that won't necessarily fix yours, right? You might need different tools.
I love how practical this is, and I love how practical all of your tools are. it's just this approach that it's measurable and that it's something that you do consistently over and over again. The more you do it, the better it gets. The first time is the hardest. I won't say that, but the first time is difficult because you're just getting used to actually doing this, and you break it down, you dissect it. I think
Yeah.
we're learning a lot here, and I really appreciate you for coming out and teaching us, and for being open and honest about how you also have experienced this and are experiencing some stress and anxiety even as we're going through this, because you want to do your best, and so there's some arousal there. Your body is telling you, hey, pay attention, don't mess up. And
Yeah.
it is good stress, and there's bad stress, and as you were saying, I love how you brought that up. There are healthy blue days, there's real sadness, as Dr. Burns says, there's no such thing as a realistic depression, but there is real sadness, right?
Yeah. 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 There's one last comment here in the things about I have heard a little bit about trauma anniversaries, and I would say that everything goes on in your mind, and so what's being stored in that memory is a neural pathway, and it can re-trigger because the neural pathway is there. Think of it like a road. You drive on a road, a dirt road, and you're going to make tracks in that dirt road, right? And it's going to get deeper and deeper and deeper. And it can be hard to get out of that track. And when you're making a new road, you also have to practice. And so like with these positive tools, what I'll do with clients who've actually had recovery, like I say, sometimes it can happen very quickly, but then we want to keep processing that positive thing. And so they have homework and they have to go over their positive thoughts, or realistic thoughts, or rational thoughts, however you want to label that, and look at that in comparison to their negative ones and say, okay, this is what gained me traction. And as I keep doing that, then you'll make those new neural pathways, synapses, much stronger, and the other ones will get less with time. There's some other tools that we do with trauma and things like that. There's some exposure tools that are really important. And lots of times, the more you actually think about, like, one of the problems with anxiety is the more we avoid it, the worse it gets. So we see that with PTSD, we see that with trauma victims. The more they avoid thinking about it, the worse it gets, and the more they will actually physically react. And actually, we do the opposite. We create a story, and they have to listen to that and really engage in it day after day. And eventually, it loses its power. It's like the monster has no teeth once you see it over and over, and you're like, well, wait a minute. That is in my past, and you start to come up with your own. I'm just making up thoughts. Every individual will have their own pattern of thought where they'll be like, yeah, okay, this is going to.
Yeah. So I'm gonna cap the questions for now. I have stored these.
Okay.
So I have actually everyone that's asked a question. I have saved it, and we'll definitely see how we can get to those through the rest of the weekend. But I do have one last question that I wanna address that was asked a little bit earlier. It's about the book. The question is, do we need to read the book in order to do these tools, or do we need to actually get a counselor? Like, is it okay to just read the book and just start doing
That's a
stuff?
great question. It's a
Yeah.
great question, and the answer is yes. So it is individual. I have not had formal therapy, and I'm a therapist. I have chatted with colleagues and needed to get some extra support. But I have colleagues that have had to have, like, some really strong one-on-one, and it's individual. Sometimes the self-help books work. That book you showed, Hebron, this Feeling Good one, they used it for a clinical test. It was supposed to be a placebo. And they're like, because they were gonna measure drugs against therapy, and they needed a placebo group. And while they were waiting, they gave one group this book, and 2/3 of the people who got the book recovered from their depression. So it was better than the medication that they were studying.
That's not
so yes, self-help book can work, and that's a $10 book. Well, that one, lots of times you find it free at the thrift store. Half the time it's millions have been sold. So that's a pretty high number, 2/3. Yeah. So and there's the third that shouldn't feel bad if they need to reach out. That's why I'm here, and Trisha and Golda, and there's others. And you put someone put links in the chat box for sure.
Yeah.
we need help working through the tools. Sometimes we get locked in our own thoughts. This has happened to me, where I have to like actually write it out. And probably another reason is, I mean, my husband is really good. He's a login truck driver, but really he's like my therapist. so so I'm kind of lucky that way. So I don't want to minimize working with someone, because I do have that support system. So yeah, the answer is yes. Sometimes the book and sometimes reaching out. I've had clients that come to me, and in the intake session, we've been able to set up, and because they were already doing some of the work from the book, and they needed some extra support. And then others, I have some clients and they want to work on lots of things, and they really want to get more coping skills. They want to get a really good handle on it, and so they come much longer, and they want to like get those neural pathways really formed, and so they come week after week to really hone in on those coping skills, and that's great too. So
Awesome, awesome. Well, you know what? I've been given notice that we're gonna try to round this out,
yes,
and
I've
just
been
yeah, we're gonna go for one last question. And so this person says, I've experienced anxiety for weeks before my vaccination on April 2nd. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't breathe. I became so conscious of my breathing. I know now that it was anxiety that I was experiencing after that experience.
yeah, no, I know what anxiety is after experiencing it. Yeah, yeah, I'm, Angie, that those moments where the breathing and it's such a vital. I mean, it's like the one thing we can't live without for like you can live without water for a few days, you can live without food for a month, but boy, you can't live without air for very long, and that can be very terrifying. Um, and Sorry you went through that, and it's a really scary experience. No,
Is there,
was there a question there?
I'm wondering, maybe Angie is looking for some, maybe a tool, or I guess, what, do you have a recommendation? Is this?
Yeah, I don't know enough about her situation. I'd be reluctant to offer any specific advice in a forum like this, but certainly I encourage her to come and watch all the media and reach out, if she experiences this again, reach out for support and help, and for sure.
Yeah, we've put some links to more resources that are available, free and paid resources. There are links to the counseling practices of all of our volunteers here, Golda Marty, Angela Poach, and our speaker for tonight, Trisha K. Williams, as well. And our administrator just posted those in the chat as well. And those will be up on the Compassion Health website by the end of this weekend as well, with a few extra links in there for you guys. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out for as much support as you need. Mental health is so important.
Yeah, it's connected to our physical health, it's connected to our spiritual health. It's a package deal.
That's right. That's right. In the Bible, God says, give me your heart.
Yes.
Back then, their definition of the heart was that it was the seat of the emotions. And we know now that that's actually the mind. So God is basically saying, give me your brain. That's what I want. And for us to give him our brain, our brains have to be clear. And that's one of the reasons why I love CBT. Didn't like it at the first, because it sounded like some tough love kind of stuff, but I found out that it's actually very doable. And I just love how it helps to clear up the mind, clear up those.
And that's one of the, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. It's just one of the reasons I love team, because we don't just do CBT, right? We need that empathy piece. You need the connection. You need the warmth. And I have been to people who are just solution focused or brief focused, and it does feel a bit cold. I mean, if you're really motivated, it does help. They still have great tools, but sometimes we need to be heard. Lots of times we've never really expressed what's going on for us, and sometimes we don't even know. We've got to start talking before it actually all comes together. So I think that's really, really important piece that can be missing if we just do CBT and you don't do the normalizing, the affirmation, the empathy piece, and then the other piece, which I did today. What I did today is called positive reframing, or paradoxical agenda setting in David's world, or assessing the resistance. And that also is a fairly newer piece, or more like a David's piece. And I just think it's just so powerful. Before you get into all these tools and methods, like you say, the CBT can just sound like pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But if we do this piece first, where we look at all the beauty behind what you're going through, hey, what, we as a team therapist, I don't look at anxiety and depression as some kind of disease you've caught. I look at it as something that's beautiful, that's gone too far in some extreme, that's taking away from your peace and happiness and joy. So it's quite a different view on mental health.
Okay, well, that's awesome. Thank you so much for coming out and spending this time with us to teach us about these methods. And I hope that we'll be able to use this as kind of a springboard so that we can go out and get more information, maybe pick up feeling good, maybe maybe invest in some more education, and definitely if we need to, go ahead and get that support that we need. Why don't we close out in prayer? Would you like to go, or should I go?
I can do that. That'd be wonderful.
Praise the Lord.
All right. Heavenly Father, we are so grateful that your word has everything we need, and we're so grateful that you speak to other people that can help articulate it in ways that we can understand it. We're thankful for the different people over the years who have added to the field of mental health and help us to articulate what's going on in ways that we can understand better. We're so appreciative, Lord, of your loving kindness, and we know that people are experiencing a tremendous amount of stress and anxiety right now, and Lord, you're there for them, and you want to give them the tools to help them to not fear, but you also understand what they're going through, and you don't judge them for it. You love them through it. And I pray that you would touch each one who's listening in this moment. In Jesus' precious name, amen.
Amen. And that concludes today's first session. So everyone, please don't miss the next session. We're going to be diving deep into CBT tools tonight with with our registered clinical counselor, Trisha K. Williams. She's going to be teaching us some more powerful CBT tools to to manage anxiety and stress. It's going to be great. All right. Well, thanks again, Angela. And everyone, see you tonight. Bye for now.